Hello, 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 and welcome to week three's live broadcast. Welcome to week three's live broadcast. I am glad that you were able to make it either here for the replay or if you're hanging out here with me live. If you're here with me live, just say something in the chat, say something hello so I can make sure to say hello back to you. There we go. All right, coming back here. So yes, again, welcome. I am glad that you are here. And what we're going to do is basically just go through those questions. So you just got a chance to see those questions that were sent out in an email just a few minutes ago. I'll let you know, again, this is an extra credit thing where you are either getting a 0, a 2, or a 1. Jeanette Fox, hello, welcome, welcome. So glad that you made it here for the live version. I'm glad that you are here. Who else do we got? If you're here in the chat, say hello. All right, and I'm going to jump right into these questions that we have here without any further ado. Unless some of you have some questions or anything in the chat, feel free to type those in, and we'll also get to those. Although those ones, unfortunately, are not available for extra credit, just the ones that were in that spreadsheet from the link before. Okay, so we are looking at our first question. If you saw that earlier on the email, it was, when deciding if testimony is quote-unquote expert testimony, what is the standard? Do we judge credibility based on the expert's experience in a field and the relevance of a given testimony? What if the testimony is so biased any expert credibility is compromised? For example, scientific studies funded by tobacco companies showing tobacco is not addictive and harmful. This is a great question. So we're saying, is this a 1, a 2, or a 3? We've got a 2. Congratulations to the anonymous person. I do have your name here, but the person who submitted this, we don't call out names on these because we are assigning point value, but congratulations to that person for earning 2 points. And the answer, I think this person actually kind of is already thinking they know the answer when they're asking it, right? So the question is like, okay, we've got this standard of expert testimony, right? We're thinking about how can we evaluate different types of testimony? And if we have the standard of expert testimony, what if that person is biased? What if there's different types of expert testimony? And yeah, I mean, this is all audience analysis based, right? So if you're thinking about this, if you are the person who is trying to be persuaded, how does this work for you? Like if you were to, for example, go to your doctor and your doctor tells you something, they have a certain type of expert credibility because they are an MD. In theory, they went through medical school and all that kind of stuff. But let's say that you went to your doctor and they told you something kind of crazy. And you're like, I don't think that that's right. Or maybe it was the very first time you had gone to that doctor, right? Just because they have the credential doesn't necessarily mean that you trust them. So you might get another opinion. So all of this stuff is put into context. They may have expert testimony, but for you, that may not be enough. I don't know if you can hear this. So if you hear some kids in the background, there's college for kids going on at the San Alejo campus. So just on the other side of the wall in my office here, there is a lot of kids screaming. Anyways, coming back to what we were talking about. So, all of this stuff is context based. And sometimes someone might have the proper credentials, but they also may be less trustworthy. And you may also have someone who might not have the credentials, but they have lots and lots of experience. So for example, let's say that you have someone who's a professor of business and econ, and then you have someone who has been running a successful e-commerce website for the last 10 years. And this professor over here is very skilled and versed in all of like these macroeconomic theories and stuff, but they themselves haven't actually run a successful business. Whereas this person over here, maybe they don't have any credentials at all. And typically, you're able to say, well, which one of these is more important? They both have something to provide. And in this example, neither one is necessarily compromised, but there's always different levels of the quality that your expert testimony is going to be able to provide to whatever the information is that those people are giving. Cool. If you got any questions as we go, just put them in the chat. All right, our next question here is, the video didn't talk about narrative rationality. Can you please explain this in further detail? Sure. So narrative rationality is a combination between narrative fidelity and narrative coherence. So narrative rationality is looks at those two things. So we talked about those two things. Narrative rationality is looking at those in totality. Okay, so narrative rationality is like your ability to believe the narrative, and that it makes sense, and that it's coherent, and that it filters into your ability to make this a reason for making decisions, whether in action or persuasion. Can tests of evidence be applied to lay testimony? Absolutely, yes. Oh, sorry for that last one that just came in. The narrative rationality. That one we will give a 1. Good. Can tests of evidence apply to lay testimony? I'm going to give this one. Actually, we're going to get, so let me go back. That other one we're going to give it 2. We're feeling generous here today. We'll throw a 2 on there. So 2, and I'm keeping track of these, and we'll put them all in at the very end. So in order to know your score, you actually have to watch these videos. Okay, can the test of evidence be applied to lay testimony? We've got another 2 here. Congratulations to that person asking. So yes, absolutely, tests of evidence can be applied to lay testimony. That just because something is a not even like let's say you've got a really bad piece of evidence, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't use the tests of evidence to understand why it's an inappropriate piece of evidence. Let's say, for example, you've got a murder trial or something like that, and you've got lay testimony. You've got somebody who says they saw a car that was the color of the murderer's car, and it was driving by their house that night of the murder. However, we have, the murder was committed 35 years ago, and the trial is happening now. Okay, so we're looking at tests of evidence, so that test of recency, right? So the question is, do we really trust that person's mind to remember the color and make maybe of a vehicle 30 years ago that was driving down their street? Maybe, but again, it's something that's really worth looking at. And also the test of recency in this case could potentially mean that, I don't know, maybe we don't trust that. Cool. Will you explain categorical syllogisms in more detail is the next question, and we're going to give this one a 1. This is a good question. There's a lot more that we could actually dive into with categorical syllogisms, and we kind of, at least the way that this course ends up being shaped, I think we look more toward Toulmin model-esque types of constructing of arguments, because I agree with Toulmin that the way that categorical syllogisms and the way that categorical logic a lot of times works doesn't really reflect the way that people talk. That being said, let me, I'm going to just post a link. So there's some other people who can explain this just as well as I could. So here in the chat, you should see there's a link to a YouTube video. This guy goes into way more depth. That being said, you do not have to watch that if you don't feel like it. The level of detail that we really go into is just major premise, minor premise, conclusion. But if you want more, there's some more, and he goes into quite a bit more detail. It's only 10 minutes, and he covers quite a bit. And if you really want more, then there is some more. But again, you're not going to be held, you're not going to be required to know what's in that video. But if you want more detail, there it is. And our last question here is, in your opinion, what type of argument is the most common between human in our regular life, and why? So if we're getting into my opinions, just for playing the game with us, we'll give out a 1 here. My opinions don't really matter too much for this class, and I'm not, so there's a lot of, the way that we conceptualize argument, like the type of argument, there's a lot of different ways that we've discussed that so far, right? There's so many different angles that we can approach what an argument actually is and how to dissect it and things. What I'm most interested in is probably the level, hey Malika, glad you're here. I saw you in the chat. Cool. What I'm most interested in, probably for me personally, is arguments that are happening on a level that's much more subtle than like the really overt kind of argument. There's a good book here. I'll throw this in the chat here as well. So there's a book it's pretty famous. It's called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Another book that he wrote called Persuasion, which is awesome. I'm going to throw a link in the chat here as well. Cool. So this book is kind of the stuff that I'm more interested in, and it's these ideas of the foundations a lot of times that are set forth before the persuasion attempt actually happens. If you think about when you have found yourself in an argument, the reality of the situation is that the initial argument event, right, where like now we've started, that didn't happen in isolation, right? So like everything that happened with your entire relationship with that person is part of the way that the argument starts. And there's also little windows before that where there are opportunities to set up the context and the things that are top of mind for the people that are going to be being listening to the argument. And those opportunities, I think, are probably, at least for me, the most interesting. They happen in all argument situations. So I don't know, I guess it's most common. I don't know if getting like, because arguments, and anytime someone is really saying anything, there's always some sort of argument happening, right? So like there's even by choosing to talk about one thing instead of something else, and giving voice to one thing, you are privileging that subject over the other, and you're actually creating a claim of value that's buried underneath the surface, right? That says that this thing's more important to talk about than this thing. But that in itself can be constructed or construed as some sort of argumentative claim. Now, again, we're digging beneath the surface here. Doesn't necessarily mean that is happening. And that's not, a lot of times the way that we talk about it in communication is what's actually being said. But nonetheless, if we're thinking about persuasive attempts and if we're thinking about the things that are actually going on, those do happen. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in. I think claims of policy, though, if we're looking at claims of fact, value, and policy, I would say claims of policy are probably the most interesting just because they get people to do stuff, right? And I mean, you can, if you're looking at this Cialdini book, claims of fact and claims of value would probably come beforehand, right? So if you're thinking about, it's persuasion, right? So it's the stuff that happens before the persuasive attempt. And really, if you're thinking about the persuasive attempt, that would be the actual change, that the actual action that's happening. So it's this context setting. So you have to get people to believe certain sets of facts and certain sets of beliefs of values. And then from there, making the persuasion attempt. So it's almost like those two things are happening beforehand. So that sets the stage for the claim of policy. But I'm just kind of going on and on here. So those are all the questions that we had for this week. If any of you have anything else that you want to chat about, you are here in the chat, then feel free to say something. Otherwise, we'll just hang out here for a moment. We only got a couple people on here, which is totally fine. But yeah, if you need anything, any general questions, any questions about your stuff, feel free to put it in the chat here. Remember, there is a little bit of a delay, so when you hear this, I've already said it a couple seconds ago, so it takes me a sec to get to your question. But other than that, I hope everything is going well. Cool. So Malika says, I do argue with my parents about different things almost every day, and that's why this class is really interesting for me to learn more about argumentation. Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I think that, so some of the videos that you've seen are redone, and I think the Burke stuff is probably where I really like the way that that's kind of showing up in this class right now, where like anytime that you find yourself arguing with your parents or trying to create, if there's an argument situation, you look for the place of blame. Like if someone's trying to argue for something, they're either blaming themselves or they're blaming others. And that's just a really interesting, anytime you feel yourself in an argument, you can just ask the question, who's being blamed here? Is it the person arguing, or are they blaming someone or something else? And the attribution of blame in an argument situation, I think, is pretty interesting. Malika's got a question that I think that she's typing, so we'll wait for that here. I'm going to get a sip of water. The question is, will the final exam be multiple choice like the quizzes? Yes. Okay, I'm going to hang out here for another, I'll hang out here until 12:15, 12:16. If you want more of me giving little speeches, here's something fun. You can see me give a speech every morning or so on Instagram. I wake up early in the morning and I go for a run and I do some CrossFit-ish type things, and then I meditate, and then I record a video. And it's good practice for me. I think everybody should do something like that. It's super healthy and fun. If you follow me, I won't follow you back, not because I'm trying to be not connecting, but because I want to keep a healthy distance. Cool. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful, and congratulations to those of you who earned those extra credit points. And everybody keep asking questions. Remember, we're looking for questions that reflect the content. And I hope you have a great 4th of July to here, Malika, and everybody else. And if you're watching this on the replay, make sure that you ask an extra credit question next time, right? These are just little questions that you could possibly get 2 extra credit points for, and it adds up over the course of all these weeks. So have a great 4th of July. Thank you so much, and we are signing off. Thanks.